Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Underrail. Last time we wrapped things up with the next sub-technology, and good news, everyone. We came right on up to Muty Island. Also, it's not that the professor didn't have anything for me, it's that me and my glorious foresight and lack of hindsight neglected to use a key item we picked up while at the Nexus. But, we're about to pop some hypercerebrics and have a nice long talk with the ferryman. He speaks through the smoke. See, you started opening them, I do. The lighthouse. This luminescence, captivating, ain't it? Very much so. So, what's inside? Honestly, so far, just death. What else? He shakes his head. Yes, they're tombs, alright. But tombs have treasure. What's inside? A lot of really interesting things, if you must know. Things the world could benefit from. Really? Like what? So, realistically speaking, their idea of art was a little bit redundant. But technology is one thing and history is another. I'm gonna say history. History. He chuckles. Do you think we would be here if people cared about history? They care only if it's aligned with their worldview. Otherwise, it gets tossed into the ocean like a torn rag, or distorted to such extremes that it had better been tossed. And besides, even if they did care about it, most can't learn anything from it anyway. He stares into the sea, appearing as though he's looking straight through the surface. Descent. Takes a long draw, blows smoke, and continues without looking at you. What do you want this time? Every time we mention the ruins, you start silently staring into the water. What is that supposed to mean? Thinking about something. Who do you think you are, kid? Just a man looking for truth. Oh, you think so? You're lost. But in the grand scheme of things, so am I. You, me, the rest of Underrail. The poor suckers who lived here, and whose skulls now serve as insect and fish homes, and for coral to grow on. He takes a long draw and exhales the smoke to the left. He gazes at you, while holding his pipe. Then he takes another draw, exhaling to the right this time. Well, perhaps I do that. Staring at the water thing, haven't noticed. Must be subconscious. Yes. He nods. Subconscious. Because it is down there, kid. The center. You stare at the surface of the sea, but only see your own reflection. You break the surface and see nothing but the unlit depths. The center. It's somewhere down there. Everything's sinking towards it. Down, down. These Lemurians, that's how they called themselves. They even built toward it. And they met their doom before us. Before, but only seemingly. We're all sinking together. Tell me more about these things, about Lemurians. You speak as though you know a lot about them. If you want specifics, I know little about these Lemurians. Perhaps even less than you do. What I do know, though, is that they were people who attempted to ascend through technology. Biocore too, and many, many others, all doing essentially the same, but differently. They thought they could emulate or even return to the surface or beyond. He chuckles. Look what became of their endeavors. But it ain't the fate that awaits only the deluded and voracious, but us as well. Only we are lighter and thus sink more slowly. But we do sink. We do make our descent into center, one way or the other. One way or the other. You keep mentioning it, but what is this center, this descent into center? You really want to know, kid? Yes. You think you can handle something which could change your whole perspective on life, existence, reality itself? I can handle anything, old man. Bring it on. We'll see. He walks to the cabin, pouring the ash from his pipe into the sea along the way. There he kneels, effortlessly at his age, beside the bed, and grabs a small plastic box from underneath it. It's a simple, dark brown box with a worn-out label. In it, another pipe. Superficially similar to the one he's been smoking up till now, but with a rougher texture and more prominent signs of age. Inside is also a nylon bag filled with what appears to be tobacco. After sprinkling the said tobacco into his pipe, dosing it carefully until satisfied, he uses a tamper, a pin-shaped tool with a wide, flat head, to gently compress it. He then repeats the process 2 more times before putting the pipe tool away. He takes a draw, not yet lighting his pipe, and returns all of the items but the pipe back into the box, which he also returns to its original location. He walks back to you, stroking his yellowish mustache with his left hand, eyes glued to the rusty deck. Ferryman then pulls out a lighter. Descent into center, you say? He says and lights his pipe, puffing a few times until it's properly lit. Then he takes a long first draw and expels a thick cloud of smoke that has a unique, full-bodied, musty smell, evocative of memories of an unexperienced past. He takes a moment to relax, to stare at the relatively calm sea. Then he looks at you, dead straight in the eye. We can begin, kid. What I'm about to tell you are my own thoughts, observations, ideas, my own philosophy, which I based on years and years of study and experience. He puffs some more smoke. I looked within myself and the surrounding world, its history and culture, and lack thereof. I read the old books, and books older still, and I studied and compared their contents in an attempt to extrapolate the ultimate truth. This is what I inferred. This reality of ours stretches in a certain direction, drawn by something I refer to as the spirit of gravity. This direction leads to true death. Do you mean to say that our collective path as a civilization leads to inevitable doom? In a sense, yes. And not only the paths of civilizations, mind you, but of individuals as well. Them as well. However, allow me to explain further. You see, at the very top, way up there, that's where the origin is. It's the highest point of existence, free from all of the hardships, complete weightlessness. And then there's the center, where true death awaits. The spirit of gravity I mentioned. It's the call of true death. Everything that exists, you, me, communities, and entire civilizations heed this call. Everything that lives must grow old and heavy, and eventually die. So you represent the passage of time spatially as a vertical decline, am I right? Good, good. You understand. But here's the catch. The passage of time is but an illusion. It is simply a way in which we perceive this directional nature of reality. Its physical manifestation is the tendency of humanity to dwell in ever greater and darker depths of the earth. The humanity that was closer to the origin dwelled among the stars. You understand? If I understand correctly, the spirit of gravity is pulling us toward the center no matter what. And what we see as a passage of time is fundamentally the passage of our descent. Time is place. This point in time we're currently in is the physical point of our decline. Am I right? He gives you a slight smile. Very good. You seem to be understanding things well so far. I think I could safely proceed and say a word or two about true death. Go for it. He takes a draw. True death is the ultimate death, the permanent death. It is one that marks the end of both our material and our immaterial existence, I presume. He nods. It ain't something I can confirm through strictly empirical means, but everything I've learned so far led me to believe that it is true, 'cause, you see, false death does not release one from the descent. One will just be reborn again where he left off, or even lower. Suicide will not only not help you, it will instead confuse you and further remove you from the origin. You understood the essence. That immaterial part of us remains even though our corporeal mechanism ceases to function, and that allows us to return and continue with our descent. True death is the literal death, material and immaterial, and is not a desirable outcome. That is what I've inferred. He puffs some smoke. So what is true, literal death, actually? Death is the cessation of action. False death only of physical, and only until you are reborn, while true death is of all action, and of your whole essence. False death is not death at all, but most will know no better. He puffs smoke. And in origin, I get to exist on, right? You want to live on? You don't want all your actions to cease, you say? But they will. The only question is in which manner, by returning to the origin, or by dying a true death. In true death, your action will be accentuated to an unbearable vibration, and in that manner, transformed. And in origin? Origin takes a long draw and exhales slowly. We'll get to origin. And what are these unbearable vibrations? What happens after that? Old books, they all describe it differently. He slowly puffs smoke. Some focus on its material aspect, others on its immaterial one. But what they all agree upon is that it concerns the entirety of you, your whole existence, your body, and your essence. They also agree that true death, no matter which form it has been explained through, is unbearable. Seems like the people of the old world saw the same thing through different lenses. Reality is deceptive, more so due to our imperfections and the imperfections of our senses. Thus, none of the old books are without false observations and deductions, but once you look at all of them, the falsities vein and the intersection of human thought can help us glimpse into the fundamental qualities of reality. For even humanity recognizes its own essence to some degree, but it often ignores it. He puffs smoke. Believe what I say, or don't. Fine with me. I'm just trying to give a truthful description of something I deem to be of supreme importance. But know this, you cannot strive if there is nothing to strive for. Otherwise, you're just stumbling pointlessly through the darkness of existence. If every death is a false death and we will always be reborn, how do we know if we've died before? It takes a moment to think about it, puffing while doing so. We can't know. We can't, because it would be necessary to look at ourselves from perspective that would allow us to obtain the means to justify our belief that we have experienced false death. In that perspective, we cannot assume. I don't think so. I don't know if I died a false death before, and ultimately, it ain't important. For when it comes to looking at the whole, there is no such boundary there at all. Since it's a false death, and hence not a death at all, and it did not happen before, nor is it about to happen, as time is just an illusion. Well, you're right. It's not important, all things considered. The most important thing is that we recognize its existence. Its existence. He puffs smoke. That is the first step. False death is something beyond our senses, for it destroys them. That is one of its consequences, and it is why it fools us. As with many other things, we cannot rely on empiricism alone to give us the answer. We can, however, acquire the knowledge of its existence. Are you implying, well, yeah, I think we'll go with the first one. Are you implying that the only ones who have these answers are higher beings? He pauses. That is an important question, as those atop a cliff can see more than those gazing up at it from below. And by the virtue of being higher, in a more profound, true sense, the higher ones have insight into things that the things this imperfect humanity does not and perhaps cannot. The most revered of the old books claim to have received knowledge from higher celestial sources, whatever form they were believed to have had. This knowledge was claimed to have been inaccessible by humanity in any other way beyond these revelations, kid. Puff smoke. But of course, some men only claimed so. The true answer lies in wisdom, for it encompasses these crucial things: experience, knowledge, and the capacity to understand and reconcile the former two in order to form new knowledge. From wisdom, also, inevitably emerges humility, which evicts the childish arrogance and turns the mind into fertile soil for understanding things supreme. For knowledge is, in simple terms, a justified, true belief. Falsities can be delivered, but not known, as they are by definition false. Thus, knowledge requires truth. Truths that are not believed also cannot be known, for how can you claim to know if you yourself do not believe? Thus, knowledge requires belief. But belief in something, even if true, is not knowledge, for without justification, it might be but a guess, blind luck, and that is not knowledge. Thus, knowledge requires justification. Where does justification come from, you ask? Chuckles. That is something we can debate till our descent into center, kid. But I can tell you where it doesn't come from, and that is from profane quantification, the reduction to the confines of what is available to the senses. Alright. So tell me about whether we can know if we've died before. We can't know. We can't. Because it would be necessary to look at ourselves from a perspective that would allow us the means to justify our belief that we have experienced false death. In that perspective, we cannot assume. I don't think so. Alright, so this is retreading, and you do have to seek through them. Okay, tell me about false and true death again. Tell me about what true literal death is again. Okay, let's return to this later. I'd like to move to a different concept. Fine. So, origin, we good? Origin, highest point of existence, free of all the hardships, complete weightlessness. Tell me about the origin. I have observed the decline of humanity, its slow but steady descent. If we've sunk from the surface to the underground, then what higher position did we occupy before that? I kept asking myself that question repeatedly for years, looking for records from before the surface. And you found none. Actually, I found many. I read about celestial space above the surface from which those who came before us fell from a higher place and higher state. They became heavier, and they fell down. He puffed smoke. But not even that celestial space from which they fell is the origin. It is far too close to the surface. Too close. Origin is higher above, among the stars. It is where one can achieve complete weightlessness. Origin is complete weightlessness. So this weight, it is not only physical, is it? It must be some kind of burden we carry within ourselves. It is both, he nods. It is both. The weight which we carry on our backs and the one we carry within. This burden, it makes us sink to the center. In fact, our very existence is like a constantly sinking ship. From the origin to the center, all of us share the ride, but the ship is tilted forward. It takes a draw. Tilted, some of us being on its higher end, the stern, some on the lower bow, closer to the center, and the rest, somewhere in between. So even though a person is relatively light, the heavier people will still weigh down the ship and make us all sink faster. In a way, but I'd rather phrase it like this. We share our burden, because what weighs down the ship is our combined weight. We may have our own burden, but we can help ourselves by helping others with theirs. That is the key. You understand, kid? But what happens if we are light enough? Can we stop sinking? If we are lighter than existence, we ascend. Alright, ascension. If we are lighter than existence, we ascend. When you say lighter than existence, what do you mean exactly? To be lighter than existence is something that is not easily explained. For those who truly know it, cannot speak. I will say this though. Whatever makes you heavy physically, as well as mentally, let it go. The simplest first step you can take is to help others with their burdens, for this will unburden you. So we share our burden, like in that ship metaphor? He nods. So it's basically help others to help yourself. Not all help unburdens. And sometimes it even burdens you and or others further. Be careful when reducing a truth to something you find easier to comprehend, for you might lose crucial details. He puffs smoke. Burden is the key. What happens when we ascend? What happens when you ascend to the origin, you ask? nothing happens, for that presumes passage of time. All happening, all action, all temporal movement is a struggle and always draws towards the opposite pole, the true death. What origin is, though, is a state of complete weightlessness and absence of any struggle. Do you understand? The only way in which we can transcend the spirit of gravity, and we can indeed only transcend it, we cannot resist it, is to turn our thoughts and our actions towards the origin. The origin. We must rid ourselves of all the things that make us heavy, that burden us, not only so that the spirit of gravity will stop affecting us, but so that we may be lighter than existence itself and float upwards to the origin. He takes a draw. We can make a pause here. I want to keep going. Very well. So let's see. Let's head back to Ascension. What is Ascension like? The real Ascension happens instantaneously, or rather, outside time, and is present throughout, for it radiates from the origin. The realization of this ascension partakes to some extent in physical reality, and comes from my thoughts, and is reflected in my actions. But ascension is available to all, regardless of the situation and even their actions. They are not essential. If time is an illusion, then the ascension happening instantaneously, temporally speaking, seems logical. You're thinking the right way. That is the way I approached it too. First came to the realization that the reason all of us can ascend is because all of us can descend. You see, the spirit of gravity affects us. We're burdened, heavy, and we are being pulled down through physical existence. Yet all of us, as sentient beings, possess within us the means to deal with our burdens. He takes a draw. But just because we can doesn't mean we will, and just because we possess virtues doesn't mean we're flawless. All will descend fully, but only some will ascend. Only they are the true light of the origin. The rest are errors, distorted refractions, illusions, imperfections. I don't speak of men, for they are all imperfect. I speak of that which is within them. Soul? Takes a long draw and fills the space between you with thick smoke. What it is all that is left of you once you've rid yourself of the burden. Strive to be that within you which is weightless like colorless light. That is how you will save most of what is man within you and what you call yourself. Why couldn't we become lighter through technological advancement? It's a fool's quest. A fool's quest to try and surmount the spirit of gravity through technological means. Man will never truly live on the surface again. Never. Because the time is the place, you understand? The reality and its conditions only move in one direction, for such is their nature. You don't believe me? Neither would Biocore NFT technocrats. And look what became of their endeavors. They were too greedy and too large, too heavy. What about smaller groups of people or individuals using such technology? They indeed were, but that does not mean individuals will fare any better. In fact, their will for dominance over nature, high technology being the most successful mechanism by which it can be achieved, might be even greater than that of the great supercorporations. That would depend on the individual, wouldn't it? And seeking ascension separately from everyone else, all alone like yourself, is bound to result in some difference in burden. I will grant you that not all people are alike, but they are imperfect. We all are. He sighs. It is paradoxical to seek ascension to the weightless heights of the origin, yet clinging onto the heavy solids of the deep lows. The deep lows. He puffs smoke. Let me tell you something which will hopefully clarify my position better. This ferry of mine, it's a piece of technology. A piece of old technology. It's made of heavy metal, and it hovers over the dark depths, the center's curtains. It ain't simple. It requires fuel, maintenance, understanding. It's a burden in every sense. But a ship, no matter how heavy, it will not sink as long as its weight does not overcome the volume of water it can displace. Don't you understand, kid? It ain't the fact that the boat is heavy, but that it is light enough to stay afloat. If I were to load this with too much cargo, it would sink. If there was no one to maintain it, it would sink as well. But a sailor who does not maintain his ship has sunk himself already. The most important thing, however, kid, the most important thing is that a ship can only sail on water. It cannot rise above the surface of the water nor climb on land, for it is inherently impossible. And thus, technology on its own allows us to stay afloat. Perhaps we can even push it ashore. Yet those who seek to make ships fly, the burden which necessitates its creation will make it crash down in flames and sink to the bottom of the sea. Okay, let's return later. Spirit of gravity. The spirit of gravity, true death's call. Everything that exists heeds this call. Everything that lives must grow old and heavy and eventually die. You mentioned that you invented the term spirit of gravity. How did it originate? The term was inspired in large part by certain old books. The scientific term gravity is familiar to you, a force which objects with mass attract one another. But spirit, that is something entirely different. Proxy of some greater divine will? It takes a draw and a moment to ponder. Many of the old world texts certainly mention and promote, revolve around this idea. But pursuing this line of thought would open a whole new avenue of discussion in and of itself. To me, spirit is an immaterial property that brings something to life. It's like a spark. Yes, a spark that ignites fuel in an internal combustion engine of a ship like mine. Yes, let's take a ship as an example. You have the hull, the engine, all the internal components. You can add fuel and oil and everything else you need. You can have all the elements in their place, but the ship will be nothing but an inert piece of metal floating on water. For that ship to move and be, it needs something to breathe life into it, a spark. Only the spirit, as something of a higher order, does not cease after giving life but persists and further drives its carrier's existence through action. Let's see now, basically an immaterial force which gives life to something and makes it move. Yes. Therefore, the spirit of gravity is something that is immaterial in essence, that has a physical manifestation of a downward pulling force, like gravity. Okay, let's return to that later. Center. Too complex right now. Passage of time. Okay. True death. True death is the ultimate death, the permanent death. I've been thinking, can you help someone with their burden by killing them? Strictly hypothetically. He pauses, frowning. Killing? What do you mean exactly? I've told you that death, false death, removes you even further from the origin. Yes, but what if someone has a burden which will keep dragging him down until he's physically dead? Shouldn't death help him? False death is only of the flesh. You seem to be disregarding the essence, and what is not confined to the body, what defines us no matter what form or shape we take or end up with. He puffed smoke. You told me burden comes from many sources. Well, maybe burden from certain sources requires certain methods. That I did say, but who can make the right call? Can I? Can you? Things are often different than they seem, and death, even if false, is not to be taken lightly. Ultimately, I don't have a definitive answer to this question. What I can tell you, though, is that I have killed many people for reasons which might seem justified or not, and in doing so, even if I have, let's assume, helped some of them somehow, I've only burdened myself further. That I'm sure of. He puffed smoke. I often feel remorse for the lives I've taken. You feel the burden. Let's return to this later. So, burden. The weight which we carry and the weight we carry within. This burden, it makes it sink to the center. Those that are closer to the center than us. Yes? Are the faceless one of them? He puffs smoke and nods. Good, good. How did you know? Their advanced technology means great bird. I mean, honestly, yeah, many reasons, really. And there truly are many. Their reliance on technology, the physical space they occupy, the physical form they bear, their past. All these things add to their burden. What do you know about their past? Concretely, very little, for few know much about the feared tunnelers. But from what I do know, I can abstract and compare, and resemblances materialize. The factors I mentioned, they share them with many others. Yes, they are further down than most of us, but I think they're starting to realize. Are there others like them? Pardon me. Yes, as man partakes in reality and is drawn down by the spirit of gravity, he descends towards ever lower levels, along with, but sometimes also as a vanguard of, humanity. Sometimes whole groups can be this vanguard. And they are a vanguard in the sense that they serve as an example of decline? Exactly. Can they drag us down if we offer them a helping hand? Possibly. You cannot help those who won't help themselves. Helping them means carrying their burden yourself, or they accumulate more of their own. Yet those who want to help themselves might drag you down in doing so, like a drowning man pulling both his rescuer and himself to a watery grave. And then there are the sinister ones, the wicked. The weight of men comes from many sources, many sources. Some we know intrinsically, but the rest can only be seen through the burden of others. He takes a draw. But, as I've said before, helping others with their burden will also help you, but it can also burden you further. You simply need to be wise. For negative examples, there must also be positive ones. I believe we can learn just as much, if not more, from those who are above us than those below, the vanguard. You are right, kid. But the thing is, some lessons can only be learned from the mistakes of others, whereas we can draw wrong conclusions from looking up. Humanity of the higher states always looked up, always. Yet they sunk into a place where looking up means looking at the ceiling. Perhaps by not looking down, they never notice themselves sinking. He exhales a thick cloud of smoke and looks up. I have no further comments. Do you consider money to be a burden? Is money a burden? For individuals, it depends. For humanity, indubitably. He pulls a coin out of his pocket and sets it on his hand. It's got the physical weight, be it a coin or a plastic card. It's got weight. But this weight, this physical, quantitative property, pales in comparison to the true weight that money can have. Puts the coin over his eye like an oblique monocle. It's a lens through which humanity has quantificated the values of everything. As everything can be expressed through it, everything has a price. For to quantificate means to reduce to discrete magnitudes, and to reduce means to remove the qualities deemed unimportant. As humanity's higher values eroded, so did they become quantificated to this most profane material form. In fact, kid, this very burden is a large part of the erosion itself, the corruption. I suspect you use money because you have to. I only use it when I gotta, 'cause I gotta, and the amount I gotta. Everything beyond that is a burden. Would you abolish it, given the chance? Whether I want to or not is irrelevant, as is the question of whether I could or couldn't. It is a sad part of humanity's imperfection. If money did not exist, it would be necessary to invent it. Good or bad, we can't live without it. As long as we are a part of humanity, we will inevitably share some of its burdens. He puffs smoke. Let's return to this later. I want to visit a different concept now. So, let's head back to origin. The highest point of existence, free of all the hardships, complete weightlessness. What made humanity heavier so that they fell down? Humanity as we know it is flawed and imperfect, heavy and corporeal, easily seduced by quantified materialism instead of seeking intangible qualities. Therefore, humanity as such could never have been an origin. Whatever form, not physical but essential, the proto-humans have had, and old books claim many, they were light, yet they became heavy. If being in origin is equal to weightlessness in the absence of struggle, then it was either one of the two things which could have brought humanity down, immaterial burden or some kind of struggle which arose externally. You imply a conflict. He puffs smoke. Old books spoke of great celestial wars between higher beings, wars which arose from what is essentially distancing from the origin and accumulation of weight by some. This brought them down, but that struggle was, it could be inferred, preceded by some kind of heaviness. Ultimately, I don't have the answer as to what made humanity heavy, for I don't know it, but I have answers as to what we can do to make ourselves lighter by looking at humanity of the origin. Looking, kid. All the things I told you, they are true in principle, but what does that mean in practice? He sighs and shakes his head. A singular answer to this is difficult for me to produce, so I must yet again turn to a higher principle. And that is orientation. Ascension is instant, yet the passage of time is an illusion. I am a heavy old man, lighter than I've been, but only enough for me to float above the remains of civilizations no more. Yet I gaze down with care to unburden myself and seek answers and knowledge. But my orientation is towards the origin. Even if false death confuses me, kid, I'll still look up. He takes a long draw before tilting his head up and exhaling a column of smoke. Let's return to this later. So let's try the center again, where the true death awaits. So what is the center? This reality of ours stretches in a certain direction drawn by something I refer to as the spirit of gravity. This direction leads to true death. This is what I told you when we started, didn't I? He looks through the surface of the sea with focusless eyes. This lasts for a moment until he recognizes that his pipe is without smoke. He then empties it overboard, sprinkling over the sea what was once tobacco, but now mere ashes exhausted of all former quality. As fire burns and the light flames rise and reach the ceiling, ashes scatter and fall down. Some of the hot air escapes through the holes in the ceiling, but most of it accumulates in the high pockets until losing that heat and diffusing into nothingness. The only thing that remains of the fire are the ashes. He pauses, then continues. As humanity accepts matter as the only reality, the world which was once spacious and rarefied solidifies, becoming denser and denser, like a shrinking cell in the prison of burden that we've been unable to see outside of, thus accepting it matter in the first place. At one point in space, where the world, reality, existence becomes the densest, we will have reached the center, enclosed within and existing in some barely recognizable, distorted form befitting of our true death. That is my view. He runs his fingers through his mustache and beard, nodding to himself. After all we've spoken about, I'd like to hear yours, kid. In the end, what do you think? So let's see. So literally, all of your options are just a sliding scale of I agree towards disagreeing and then just finally being a rude piece of shit. But for the time being, I agree with you completely. I feel we as human beings should strive to be as light as we can from both corporeal and spiritual standpoint, and to recognize and seek quality and ultimately ascension in things greater than us. While you were talking, he was refilling his pipe with fresh tobacco, compressing it quietly with his tamper before eventually relighting it, all done in the same fashion as when he first introduced you to the descent into center. I see. He puffed smoke. Then we're in agreement, kid. Don't regard this question of mine as the end of our discussion, kid. By no means. This place we're in as humanity, it poses infinite questions for us to answer. Infinite. I believe by getting to that point we're done, but we can take a quick cycle through. Okay, so essentially, if you've been watching the options, once you see nothing but tell me again or let's return, you can more or less go on to another topic. And I believe we are in fact done. I need a break. He nods and puffs smoke. I haven't discussed the descent into center with anyone since Hank. He pauses. Hank Wardell, was it? Yes. Wardell. Do you recognize that name by chance? So, while we're here, tell me about Hank Wardell. Hank was an older gentleman, not as old as myself, but most certainly a man who has spent his years acquiring knowledge and building up great wisdom. This made him catch up or even surpass me in this regard. He strove for the optimum, and that is the aspect of him I admired and found fascinating the most. The way he thought of and did things. He pauses. Due to the circumstance he was in at the time, I can't tell you a whole lot about him. I'm obliged to discretion, you see. Even mentioning his name was, perhaps, a bit of an oversight on my part, but that doesn't matter anymore, no. He puffs smoke and stares into the distance. Still, him and I, we had a great discussion, debate, regarding the dissent and dissenter. Agreements on certain topics solidified our beliefs, while disagreements forced us to think hard in order to refute each other's arguments. And arguments were indeed strong. Some I haven't been able to refute to this day. He may have been the best conversational partner I have ever had. I often wonder how my arguments are holding up after these few years since our encounter. He exhales a column of smoke and lets his mind wander off. So, Hank Wardell was our house's original owner. There's a few bits here and there that you can pick up on Hank, and I was waiting until now. Hank Wardell is basically another game's protagonist at this point. Like, he got around. He did things. And what killed him? If he died, was him tinkering around with toys in his own basement. And for all we know, there was a rift in the basement. He could also be a Riftwalker. He could still be alive and could perhaps be relevant in another game. Who knows? Alright. What do you do with the more interesting things you find, like artifacts and various other oddities? Are you willing to trade them too? I do find things of greater value that is inexpressible through mere coinage, mere quantity. But ultimately, I do not collect them. I pass them on. Puff smoke. There's no other way but to pass them on, kid. I do, however, make sure to give them to someone who will be enriched by it, even if just a little. Enriched in the real sense of the word. He ponders for a moment. Very well, I'll show you some of the things I've found. The price I ask for them does not reflect their qualitative value, mind you, for that would be pointless. No, I'm merely covering my expenses. And what's notable about that is, well, alright, so I'll explain some stuff in a bit, but let's go ahead and finish conversational points before we looked at his stock and everything. There was something you wanted to say when we talked about the monolith. A while ago, 14 years or so, I think. Takes a long, steady draw. Yes, when a thing came into my possession, this little object that it resembled, it may be better to say looked like it came from the monolith. Got it from a pirate. He puffed smoke. The name eludes me, but he was a member of the pirate crew that lived at Port Cedo long before the jetters came in. I traded it for something I scavenged. He said he got it from some other man who had apparently found it and claimed it came from the dreaded glowing canine. I thought it looked interesting. Very unusual. Very. Can you describe it? Well, it is difficult to describe its shape, as it was odd. He looks at his palm as if still holding the item. It had these two sides, two faces, one made of crystal, the other some kind of dark rock. Pardon me. And depending on the angle from which you inspected it, the shard always appeared somewhat different. I could never tell where each face exactly began when viewed from the side, and it felt different depending on the perspective. I always found it heavier in my hand when staring at the rock face than the other way around. Yet the crystal face had this attractive prismatic glow when you'd stare at it, but cast no light at any other objects. That's the reason I bought it, for its utter peculiarity. The man who sold it to me referred to it as the shard, but it never appeared to me as something that had been broken off, as something to have that name, but rather like a whole singular piece. But the name shard still stuck with me for some reason. He puffed smoke. So what'd you do with it? I carried it with me around and I looked at it. He puffed smoke. It did remind me of the monolith, like its dull representation. The more I thought about it, the more it struck me as a sculpture of an artist whose inspiration laid in the monolith. It did. It did. I just liked holding it in my hand and looking at it. Pretty, pretty. Shiny, shiny. Till the day I saw the Sommerbeeren performing that ritual. What ritual? I don't remember exactly what kind of ritual they were performing, because on one hand, I knew nothing about their ways, whereas now I know merely little. But on the other, because of the circumstances I am about to explain, I was sailing a bit further north than usual on that day, just past large horticultural gardens, and I saw them on an island to the east. Saw the colorful robes of their shamans, the torches, smelled the incense even from a great distance. And then I felt I should approach them. He puffed smoke. To this day, I'm not certain why I thought this, and even less why I did it. I was in my ferry. In my ferry, yes. And then I found myself stepping onto the island with my shotgun in my hands. They were surprised by my intrusion, and hellishly mad. But something still kept them from killing me right then and there. I could see the confusion and hesitation in their eyes. Placed my shotgun against a rock and made a few steps forward toward them, and pointed at the largest warrior. At the largest, tallest warrior. Sure, sir. Sure, sir. It was being yelled and growled alongside phrases I could not interpret. All the while, the crowd was moving back and making a circle around me and him. Me, a then much younger but unarmed man. Him, a 3.5-meter tall warrior wielding a humongous club. I was no match for him, and he toyed with me like a child would toy with a captured mouse. He would grab me, look at me, and pull on my limbs until I screamed with pain. Throw me around in different ways, which was amusing to him, his brethren as well, as they were laughing and cheering for him. Shamans smiled as well, but from the few glances I could give them, they were far more reserved in their reactions. Then he stood me up and showed me his hammer. Its head was a head of a beast, he puffs, torn off one of the largest statues. Then he lightly tapped me in the chest and sent me flying back. He was turning around with his hammer in his hand and cheering, but he quickly discovered he was the only one. I stood up, bloodied and in pain. I saw fear in everyone's eyes. I grabbed something from my pocket and threw it at Chaucer. Hitting him in the back of the right knee, he dropped to the ground, dead. In the back of the right knee? That's not exactly a vital body part. It ain't, but it didn't need to be. Something came over me. It made me take this object and simply throw it at him. Just like when it came over me to challenge Sorcerer in the first place. You threw the shard. Correct. I threw it at Chaucer, and that's where it remained. It took... I don't even know how long for the shock and horror to dissipate from their faces. The same emotions I saw when I first approached, but now intensified. His comrades, they carried him away on a ship, northwest. Meanwhile, I was approached by their shaman who spoke things which I couldn't understand at the time, but now... He pauses. I was allowed to leave. I grabbed my shotgun and sailed away. He puffs some smoke and looks around. End of story, kid. So if you didn't talk to Ingvar, you would still manage to get the general idea of what to do from the ferryman, but you would still have to guess which corpse. So speaking to Ingvar is still better because you still get the body location, and you also get the item in your inventory to ascertain which one to dig in. Alright. Hey, do you have some kind of two-way radio on the boat? Yes. Mind giving me the frequency in case I need to contact you about something? You know, it's fine. Just let me check. He walks to his cabin and pulls out a radio station from underneath his bed. Blows away the thick coating of dust from this primitive, sturdy box before swiping some more from a microphone and a bent antenna which he promptly bends back to approximate straightness. He switches the radio on, turns a few knobs, then returns to you. Frequencies 22.787 megahertz. Again, 22.787 megahertz. If you become a pest, I'll switch it off, I will. Takes a draw. How old is that thing? Old, but it gets the job done. He nods and puffs smoke. You have any spare tobacco, or cigarettes or cigars? Tobacco is hard to come by down here in the south. Far too few hydroponic farms down here. The few sources I have are irregular, to say the least. I've got nothing to spare, kid. He pauses, glancing at the sea before looking back at you. Donnie Merchant of the Grim Jetters has a cigar or two occasionally, but I'm pretty sure he keeps those for special customers only. He blows the smoke upwards and takes a deep, calm breath. Where are you headed to next? I'll be hitting Port Cito first, and after that, probably the northeastern waters. That's the plan. That's the plan, kid. Can you mark the locations you frequently visit on this device? He looks at the navcom as if you handed him a dead rat. What do I do? You go here, tap the device, and then now mark the locations. Oh, and a short description so I know what's what. He squints, holding the navcom at an arm's length, and then is tapping on the screen. Muties, Port Cito, northeastern waters, Geyser Village. Shows you the display. That it? Nod. You don't like these things, do you? Shakes his head. My eyes and screens don't really get along, kid. Haven't for a long time. Puff smoke. Besides, you know my stance on high technology. What about heavy lifting things? Okay. Can ask you some personal questions. Very well. Ask away. What's your real name? Thomas Walker. And apparently this is randomized per run. But I don't go by that name anymore. The name is not something merely used to identify you, but rather define you. It's something you should live up to, and my former name is unbefitting of the life I currently live and have lived for many years. Now I am just Ferryman. Ferryman. Why are you here? I'm searching. For what? I think you understand by now, kid. What can you tell me about your boat? This boat's older than I am. In fact, it's so old it's been modified so many times one can hardly think of it as being the same boat. Yet, somehow, in essence, it is still the same one. It had, for instance, an internal combustion engine, diesel-powered, before it was converted to electrical. 2,500 kilowatts of power, like that of a tugboat. It's got its fair share of problems due to its age. He looks at the crane. But the crane, it never failed me. No matter the depth, no matter the weight, it retrieves. He takes a draw from his pipe, holding it with his right hand while unleashing a curtain of smoke. It retrieves. How old are you? 70. Exactly 70 years old. You have anyone? Family, friends? Or are you completely alone here? Family, no. Friends. I have people I cooperate with. Muties, pirates, even the Sormerbaron. People know me, and I know them. And with most, I am on very good terms. But friends in a traditional sense, no. The closest would be, perhaps, the people like you with whom I can discuss these fundamental questions of reality. Perhaps, but still. He puffs smoke. How come everyone leaves you alone, especially the natives? They don't seem to like anyone. I cooperate with everyone, sometimes even the Sormerbaron. I've been around for a long time, kid. Long time. I know them well enough. And I know what I need to do to be left alone. So, I believe that's everything. Literally an hour of just discussing things with one NPC. So, I'm looking for very specific items, which may not be in his stock at this moment. Although you can get a double-barreled shotgun similar to his now. An old-world double-barrel shotgun that can fire from each barrel separately or together. Some of the materials from which this gun is made feel like nothing you've encountered before. In other words, wood. And, it's got a unconditional special attack that shoots both. But, I mean, it's something. Here we go. Anchor pendant. A metal pendant with the shape of an anchor featuring a human skull and bones in the middle. Feels way too heavy for its small size, worth 2 oddity points. We'll be buying that. As well as a glass float. A small sphere of colored glass tied with rope, worth 2 oddity points. I'm gonna go ahead and grab the shotgun for collector's sake. We'll take the TNT. And I think that's good enough for now. Just like that, 4 experience points. We are over encumbered. Because of course. So you notice we got that feat, Philosophy 3. Oh wait, wow, look at that. You're starting to put the pieces together. There might yet be some meaning behind this wretched existence. You get a flat increase to your resolve at 45, and your maximum psi goes up by 15. Philosophy 1 and Philosophy 2 are both still things, but they are to lower values. We're gonna go on for just another minute or two, just to wrap one more thing up. But that was in fact the proper conversation with the ferryman. Yeah. I'll just come over here. And then go ahead and put all the excess guns in there. And you know what? The craftables too. There, that fixes it. So the thing we needed to do, this microchip implant encoder, activate it. Limco LMIE-1. Note this device has been unlocked by Senior Security Officer Jordan Grayling and does not require authorization in order to write data. Detecting active RFID microchip implants. 1 active microchip implant detected. Access RFID 041317-674F. Read personal information. So here's Norman Bridges' details. He was married to Astrid Christian Jacobson. Security clearance of C2. Medical information. He had AB negative. Full medical record. Unable to access. Implant information. A bunch of technical only 16 megabytes of physical memory? Okay. Implanted at Lemurian Health Center. Tracking information. Error unavailable. Change security clearance level. Current security clearance level, C2. Available security clearance level codes, C0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Upgrade security clearance level. Done. Security clearance level for microchip implant RFID 0413176674F has been upgraded to C4. Kaboom. And back out of that. Turn off. And we got another 2 points. Yay. So now we should be able to go and report to the professor. Speaking of, all of that put us at 54 out of 62. I would say our next major location endeavor will level us up. Come in, Bacon, come in. I have a report to make about the Nexus of Technology, a large research center, blah blah blah, blah 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 blah. After listening to you with great interest, only occasionally interjecting with various exclamations of surprise and awe, the professor shares his thoughts. Goodness me, that is a marvelous indeed. Your descent down the elevator shaft, turning on the power, exploring the floors, all of it, truly incredible. And the fact that you managed to upgrade your microchip implant's clearance level with that. What did you say the device was called? A microchip encoder. Ah yes, microchip encoder. That clearance level will certainly prove to be of great use, certainly. Excellent work, Bacon. See Marcus about your well-earned bonus. I'll contact you as soon as I have a new task for you. BioCore seem to have left most of the facilities untouched. How come they never entered them, not even after so much time? They had 2 centuries to do so. There are no records which give us a clear answer, but as you've seen yourself, their usage of mutagen to eliminate Lemurians is a very good reason why they didn't immediately enter them. Now, after that, who knows? The Lemurians were the last enemies of the BioCore Undernavy. After that, it was disbanded. Under quite turbulent and unclear circumstances, and its assets were transferred to BioCore Armed Forces. Some of it later recycled, stored away. You know how it goes. Following that, we can only speculate. Maybe these circumstances has simply led to Lemuria not being seen as important, or important enough. Maybe it was forgotten altogether. Maybe it was the mutagenic contamination that prevented it. Or maybe it all came down to some higher interests, or more precisely, disinterests we can't possibly perceive. Goodbye, Professor. Okay. So we'll go get our paycheck, and we'll call it there. It'll probably take a little bit of wandering around for him to radio in with the next set of objectives for us. Please tell me you got some. No, we're done with Marcus and Tony. Here to collect my paycheck. I'll keep your coins safe. For coins, 1-to-1 deal. Who can say no to that? He sighs. Ignore him. But there we go. Finally got a nice discussion with the ferryman. Tidied up that little oversight on my part because I neglected that we had that. And we're good to go for the next, well, expedition. So, as always, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. But, most importantly, y'all take care of yourselves. Take it easy. And next time, everything goes well, we'll come together for the next trip on the expedition.